On this week's NESN Patriots Podcast, Kevin Duffy from MassLive.com joins us to discuss New England's haul in the 2018 NFL Draft. Hello and welcome to the NESN Patriots Podcast. I am joined as always by Zach Cox. Zach, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, ready to break down some draft picks.
We are also joined by Kevin Duffy from MassLive.com. Kevin, how are you doing?
Doing well after I don't want to say it was a bizarre draft for the Patriots, but it was unexpected. I don't think any of us thought it would take the course that it did.
Yeah, it was definitely pretty strange. Patriots went into the draft with 5 picks on the first 2 days, and they only took 3 players. And I think a lot of people thought the Patriots would be able to get a lot of immediate impact players early in the draft, and I guess that kind of happened. If you look at it in a way where heading into the draft, you thought the Patriots would get a future quarterback within those first 5 picks. And then you thought that they would probably get 4 other impact players. What they wound up with was kind of that. They got Isaiah Wynn at number 23 overall. They got Sony Michel, number 31 overall. They got Duke Dawson at 56 overall. They traded for offensive tackle Trent Brown. And then they've got future second and third round picks, which will probably at some point turn into the future quarterback. Right. So all in all, it kind of worked out as expected, but in the most bizarre way possible.
Yeah, well, I think we looked at it like, okay, this was the year they have 4 picks in the top 2 rounds. This is where they have flexibility to move around and get a quarterback. And I just think that the guys who were realistic, they probably just didn't like that much. Like, they had a chance to take Jackson twice. They had a chance to take Mason Rudolph. They didn't want him. They could have taken Loletta even in the 4th round. They traded out of 105 and let the Giants take Loletta. So they just, no, I think what you were saying about them acquiring the future picks, that's going to help them with flexibility next year if they do have to trade up to get a quarterback next year. But they ended with impact, I think, guys who are going to contribute right away. The top 3 picks, Sony Michel should play right away. He might be the best running back on the team. Isaiah Wynn should start, or will have a chance to start right away. And then Duke Dawson, I think, is going to compete for that nickel spot. So they got guys who are going to help in 2018, and they also accrued some assets that could help them find that next quarterback.
Yeah, I think overall they did seem to kind of fill most of their needs, and kind of the end result of this draft was kind of what was expected when you just look at the players' names on paper there. But the way they got there was just so unexpected. I remember saying early in day 3 of the draft, thinking going into this draft, their 5 biggest needs probably were offensive tackle, quarterback, linebacker, defensive end, tight end. And after the first 2 days, they had addressed basically like 1/2 of those when you consider that everybody thought coming into the draft that Isaiah Wynn was going to be a guard. Now, looking at him a little bit more, digging a little bit deeper, it does seem like he can play tackle for the Patriots. It seems like that's probably where they want him to start. So they ended up kind of filling that more than people expected. But yeah, it was just a very odd road to get to where they did. And then, I mean, I know there's obviously been a lot of controversy about the Sony Michel pick. I think a lot of people like him as a player. I think it looks like he'll fit a lot in the Patriots system, but drafting a running back that high, especially when there were a lot of kind of talented, prototypical Patriots that came off later in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, it was definitely a bit of a puzzling move.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people were surprised in the 1st round when they didn't trade either one of their picks, and it was like, oh wow, Patriots, they're just not going to trade this year. Well, it'll be a nice and peaceful draft. More than made up for it. 8 trades on the 2nd and 3rd days of the draft. Kicked that off by acquiring Trent Brown. So let's dive into these trades before we go pick by pick. We will go pick by pick and discuss all of the players the Patriots drafted in 2018. Patriots?
Trade by trade?
No, that would take forever.
I was trying to pull up the exact trades before we came on air here, and it's way too complicated to recap.
First of all, I want to know who the guy who updates the Patriots Wikipedia page is, because like that's like the guy gets no credit, and he puts in so much work to do this. Like when the Patriots acquire a player, he's immediately on the Wikipedia page. He's immediately on the Wikipedia roster. They've got this list of trades that, like, from the 2018 draft with like every player that they've ever traded for. And like I don't know who this guy is, but he gets no credit. And it's the most I don't know. It's just kind of a bizarre.
He's the real MVP.
The most thankless job possible. No, it's not a job. This guy's
a hobby.
Right. So yeah, that's not me. Maybe it's one of you guys and you don't want to cop to it. But yeah, we're not going to go trade by trade, but it is at least notable that the Patriots traded Jimmy Garoppolo for the 43rd overall pick, and then traded that 43rd overall pick, traded what they got for the 43rd overall pick, traded what they got again and again and again. So it's really hard at this point to determine what the Patriots actually got in return for Jimmy Garoppolo. What it is so far is a future second-round pick, a future third-round pick, Christian Sam, the linebacker out of Arizona State, and like 17.8% of cornerback Duke Dawson, because it's convoluted and messy, but it's not worth explaining. One trade was a little bit peculiar, and the Boston Globe's Ben Volen got into this a little bit in the Boston Globe today. It's when the Patriots traded the 51st overall pick, which is a second-round pick, for the Chicago Bears' 4th-round pick, which is number 105 overall, and the Bears' 2019 second-round pick. Patriots admittedly did not get great value out of this, just because future picks and the trade value chart, if you really want to abide by it, basically are treated as a pick from the round later. So it would have been like trading the second-round pick for a third and fourth, which trade value chart, blah, 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 not great. Ben Volen thinks that there's some sort of weirdness going on here because it's the only time in the last 5 years that a team has traded a pick for the same equivalent round pick for the next year. Usually you improve. Usually you trade a 4th for a future 3rd or a 5th for a future 4th. In this situation, even though I said that they didn't get great value out of it, I don't think the Bears would have been willing to trade a future 1st for a second-round pick. It's the 51st overall pick. It's on the later side. But I mean, it was a little bit odd that they traded it for a future second-round pick. I guess that obviously holds a lot of value, and the Patriots might be able to use that to get their quarterback of the future, but it definitely doesn't help them in 2018.
It was definitely a little odd, but I think when I read the article by Ben this morning, all of the previous trades that he lists in saying that this has never happened in the last 5 years, every single one of those trades was the trading of a third-round pick or lower, and only one of those was a third-round pick or lower. So every other one was 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th-round pick. So later in the draft, it's much easier to kind of get a higher round for a trade. It's much easier to trade a 5th for a future 4th than it is to trade a 2nd for a future 1st, especially when the other team is the Chicago Bears, who could end up being one of the worst teams in the NFL again this year. So you could end up trading. If we come back this year, this time next year, it could end up being the Patriots gave up the 51st pick for the 37th pick and a 4th-round pick this year, which would look like a pretty good deal. Yeah. They could the pick that they got from this could end up being higher than the pick that they traded for Jimmy Garoppolo, which was the 43rd one this year. So I think overall, if the Bears come out this season and kill it and end up in the NFC Championship game or something like that, it's going to look like a pretty bad deal. But if the Bears play the way the Bears have for the last 10 years, I think it's actually a pretty solid deal.
I actually liked it because I just thought that they realized after day one they were not going to get a quarterback, so they wanted to just build up some assets for next year. The fact is, the last 3 drafts, there's been 13 QBs drafted in the top 2 rounds. 10 of those QBs were acquired by teams that traded up to get them. So oftentimes when you're drafting a quarterback, you need to maneuver around the board and you need to be aggressive to get them because they're such a hot commodity. So I think by grabbing that second-round pick next year, you have 2 second-rounders next year. You potentially have 3 third-rounders because you get Detroit's 3rd, and they're projected to have 2 third-round comps for Nate Solder and for
Malcolm Butler.
Malcolm Butler, of course, yeah, and Malcolm Butler. So they, in theory, now have a good amount of assets to kind of work around and be flexible next year if they believe that that's going to be the year they target the quarterback of the future. I think what they had in 2014 when Garoppolo dropped to them and they took him in the late 50s, you can't always bank on getting a quarterback of his status in the 50s. So I think whoever that next QB is going to be, it's not going to be Danny Etling, most likely.
Right.
But whoever it's going to be, the Patriots probably know they have to be aggressive and they might have to make a move up the board to get him. So they decided this was not the year they were going to do that. They get a pretty valuable asset for next year. I personally like the move.
And actually, in looking at it a little bit deeper, and I don't think Ben really got into this portion of it, the Patriots traded number 51 overall for the future 2nd and number 105 overall. The Patriots then flipped number 105 overall for the 114th and 178th overall picks. 178 they used on Christian Sam. 114 they flipped for the future 3rd. So basically what they got out of the 51st overall pick is a future 2nd, a future 3rd, and Christian Sam, which, I mean, then in itself, you're not doing too bad at that point for it. So, I mean, I think they probably could have got better value, but overall, not bad. Let's go pick by pick now. I would say that heading into this draft, let's just give overall thoughts on the draft. as it was happening, I didn't love it for the Patriots. I thought that they would have addressed the quarterback a lot earlier than the 7th round. I don't love a running back in the 1st round. There was a lot that they could have done in the middle rounds that they didn't do. But now that I've taken a few days to think about it, I actually kind of like this draft. I like Jajuan Bentley more than I did. He's the 5th round pick. Sony Michel, there was a run on running backs after that pick where they probably weren't going to get him with a 43rd overall pick. There was a run on offensive lineman after Isaiah Wynn. So overall, I mean, if I had to give a grade, I guess I'd give it like a B-.
Yeah, I'd be in the B territory, but that's just playing it super safe.
Yeah.
That's just the most generic grade you can give when you don't really know. I think that if you look at, you made great points with Wynn. So people probably at 23 thought, you know what, the needs on this team, they need to upgrade the front seven, specifically off the ball linebacker was an issue for them. Even though they do have Hightower coming back, they have players at that position. But Rashaan Evans was off the board the pick before they went. Leighton Vander Esch went before them at 18. So there really were, in the 1st round, after those two, there wasn't great value for linebackers at 23 or 31. Yeah. So I think the Wynn pick makes sense because if he's going to indeed play tackle, it's an obvious need that they have as well. And there wasn't really, I don't think at 23, a defensive player that you would rather have than Wynn. If you look at the board, there's a run of offensive players right after him. There's Taven Bryan, defensive tackle at 29, and that's not a position they really need to draft. There's Mike Hughes, cornerback at 30. I think they're happy with the corner they got in the 2nd round. So if we're just starting with the Isaiah Wynn pick, I thought it was a very good pick, honestly. I think they probably couldn't have done much better. Maybe fans say, well, you know what? Rashaan Evans went 1 pick ahead. Leighton Vander Esch went 5 picks ahead. Why don't you just trade up and get one of those guys? I guess that could be a fair gripe, but we have to wait and see. They obviously had their evaluations and what they thought was best.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, we'll probably never know whether the Patriots, how highly they valued guys like Rashaan Evans or Leighton Vander Esch or even Tremaine Edmonds, who slid down pretty far down the draft board. He came off at number 16 to the Bills. So after that kind of little mini run of linebackers, like you said, I don't really see anybody at that position that really kind of is worthy of pick number 23.
The next guy who came off the board was
Darius Leonard at number 36.
Ooh, he's like a project, right?
There was rumors that he was 26 years old. He's not, apparently.
I thought he was 27.
Colts reporters actually had to ask him on the conference call how old he is, and he said he's 22. I don't know where that rumor came from.
I was trying to figure out what happened with him. I was like, was he in the military or something?
Sometimes that happens. Sometimes
if it's a really small school with just crappy media relations.
I think I even had to ask what Kyle Aletta's age was when I did a feature on him. I had to ask his dad what's his birthday because it just didn't exist on the internet.
Yeah, but I mean, so that's the next guy who went after pick number 23, and then for linebackers, I mean, you got Harold Landry 10 picks later, but he's an edge guy. Uchenna Nwosu 10 picks after that, he's also an edge guy. The next off the line linebacker, I mean, I can't even find it. Fred Warner, yeah. So there was a pretty long slide before another player at that position. So even if the Patriots did feel like they wanted to draft a linebacker in the 1st round, which a lot of people thought that they should, it's really not surprising that they didn't after those guys came off the board.
Yeah, I think the bigger surprise is that they didn't take a guy like Fred Warner or even Lorenzo Carter in those middle rounds. But let's get into Wynn. Definitely an intriguing pick for me because I'm just excited to see a guy who's less than 6'3" play left tackle. It seems like the Patriots are at least considering putting him at left tackle, and it's one of those. It's a strange pick because it has a high ceiling and a high floor. Where if he can be a left tackle, then that's a player with a really high ceiling, and he was dominant as a left tackle at Georgia last year. And even if that doesn't work out, he's still probably going to be a high caliber starting guard. So regardless of what happens with Isaiah Wynn, I think that pick will work out for the Patriots. The 2 offensive tackles who came off before Isaiah Wynn in the draft were Colton Miller and Mike McGlinchey, both of whom
way high.
Yeah, way high. McGlinchey was number 9 overall. Miller was 15th overall. Both those guys gave up 19 total pressures last year, according to Pro Football Focus. Isaiah Wynn gave up 5 total pressures. So despite his smaller stature at 6'3", 320 pounds, whatever he is, he was better against better competition, than the offensive tackles who went before him in the draft.
Yeah, looking back, this is probably a guy we should have done more work on and should have talked about more in the lead up to the draft. Me personally, I saw all of the draft experts saying this guy's going to be a guard in the NFL. He's even listed as a guard in his NFL draft profile. So I was like, all right, the Patriots don't really need a guard. Focus a little bit more on Miller, McGlinchey, Connor Williams, some of these other guys. But then actually digging into him a little bit, I did a film review on him this morning. He said that the national championship game against Alabama was the best game he played as a senior. And after watching that game, I can pretty confidently say that was the best game he played without even watching his other games. He was fantastic. He didn't allow a single pressure against an Alabama defense that was just full of NFL first-rounders. He was matched up against Rashaan Evans, who we just talked about a lot of the game. He did a lot of work against Daron Payne, who went 13th overall. Who's the other one? Deshaun Hand, who was a 4th-round pick. So a lot of future NFL players going up against him in this game. Didn't move, wasn't touched. He's fantastic in pass protection. I know he's not known as much for his work as a run blocker, which I don't think is quite as important when you're a left tackle. The most important thing is to keep Tom Brady upright. And from what he showed in college against some of the best competition you can play against in the SEC, there's plenty of reasons to be optimistic about this guy, I think.
Yeah, I wonder why. I just think maybe it was kind of like the NFL draft, like groupthink, where not a lot of the beat writers do like deep, intensive work because we have a lot of other stuff, we're covering the team. So we kind of rely on the opinions of a few people, and then those opinions just kind of spread throughout everywhere. So we didn't really think about this guy as a potential prospect tackle-wise. We were talking about McGlinchey, about Colton Miller, and then you brought up a great point, Doug. His arm length is actually the same as Tony Garcia.
Yeah.
Right? So like he has, even though you would say Garcia probably has short arms for the position, but it's not as though Isaiah Wynn has like a body type where you couldn't even think about projecting.
He's not stubby.
Right, exactly. So I think while he was non-committal and Nick Caserio certainly said absolutely nothing about what position he'd be playing, it's reasonable to think they drafted him to be a tackle.
Yeah, it is. And I think that, I don't know, I don't blame draft analysts for looking at a guy who's 6'2" 3/4" or whatever he is, and just assuming that he's going to play guard. But I think this probably is a guy that we probably should have done a little bit more work on. And like you said, his arm length is definitely longer than you would expect out of a 6'3" prospect. And that's really that's why height matters at offensive tackle, is that you want a guy who's got long arms. You can kind of keep the edge defenders at bay. You need athleticism at that position. And I guess we'll see. We'll find out if height matters at left tackle, but there are some other guys in the past who have played left tackle at a high level despite their size. Even Matt Light was only 6'4". Kelvin Beachum is right around the same size as Isaiah Wynn. There's a few other guys who are around that 6'3" range. So it's not unheard of, but it's definitely going to be a little different.
Yeah, we talked about during the draft that it seems like height should be, or a lack of height should almost be an advantage sometimes. If you do have the long arms, having that low center of gravity, as long as you can move your feet quickly enough, as long as you can get in position and have the long arms that don't let those defenders just kind of get up on you, it seems like it should be kind of an advantage. And from watching Isaiah Wynn, he's got the quick feet, he's got the kind of the footwork, the movements down, all that stuff. So I'm very excited to watch him this summer to see what he can do. I'm not expecting. There's obviously a learning curve and an adjustment period even for first-round picks, so I'm not really expecting him to come in and be the day one starter at left tackle. Maybe he will be. I know that's kind of where he's projected right now, but it's gonna be exciting to watch him this summer.
Definitely. And number 2 pick the Patriots had, 31st overall, they took Sony Michel, the running back. Before we get too far into him, I did think that was interesting that the Patriots lost Nate Solder, Dion Lewis, Malcolm Butler, and Danny Amendola in free agency, their first 3 picks. Wynn replaces Solder, Sony Michel replaces Dion Lewis, Duke Dawson replaces Malcolm Butler, and they drafted Braxton Barrios in the 6th round to potentially replace Danny Amendola. So usually you don't see those like one-for-one replacements in the draft and free agency, but this draft certainly did shake out interesting for the Patriots. But I think that Michel, you kind of have to slot him into that starting running back role. Rex Burkhead is definitely good, and I think the Patriots could have gotten by with Burkhead as their starting running back, but there's some injury concerns there. He has value on special teams, so maybe you don't want to use him for 20 touches a game. Sony Michel, I think that if you're going to spend a first-round pick on a running back, you might as well just throw him out to the Wolves immediately, because rookie running backs typically have a fairly good degree of success in the NFL. It's a position that translates pretty easily. We'll see how pass protection goes for him. We'll see if he can hold onto the ball a little bit better than he did at Georgia, because he fumbled 12 times. A lot of those came early in his career. He's got, I guess, some injury concerns, but we don't know how real those really are. Yeah. So, like I said before, there was a run on running backs that really started when the Seahawks took Rashard Penny. It continued through the early part of the second round. So the Patriots probably couldn't have got Sony Michel with that 43rd overall pick. And if they weren't in love with those mid-round running backs that everyone seemed to like, then I think this was probably, I guess, the right way to go here.
Yeah, as we said before, only one linebacker came off in the second round. It's a project in Darius Leonard. Nick Chubb went to the Browns early second. Ronald Jones went to Tampa Bay. So Michelle, it probably was not going to be there at 43. I'm interested by what the Patriots have done at running back, because they've really kind of reversed course. For years, this is a team that ranked at the bottom of the league in financial spending at the position and even draft capital. They didn't really invest high draft picks in the position. Last year, the Patriots were 5th in the NFL in cap space devoted to running back at $11.01 million. This year, if you factor in Michel's contract, they're projected to rank 4th in the NFL at $10.74 million. Plus, they spent a first-round pick on the guy. Like that's they're investing some heavy capital in the running back position, and it's a pretty it's like a 180 from what they've done recently. And I don't know if you guys have any thoughts as to why that would be, but it's the only thing I could think of is that in that 2015 year where they were a little shallow at running back, it really came back to bite them when they were extremely one-dimensional. So I think what Belichick has done is he's not going to pay a single player a ton of money. He's not going to pay like a little Sean McCoy or Le'Veon Bell $12 million, but he's paying 4 to 5 guys kind of middle-class contracts, 4 to 5 guys he knows that can be starter-level players if injuries do hit that position.
Yeah, I don't know why they've decided to do this, but it definitely is interesting. And Sony Michel, honestly, taking a running back in the later half of the first round, if you do think that he can be that 1,000-yard rusher or really a bell cow, pretty good value. TJ Watt was the 30th overall pick last year, which is, I guess, where you would kind of project Sony Michel's contract as the 31st overall pick, right around that range. And TJ Watt's cap hit last year was only $1.7 million. His cap hit this year is going to be $2.1 million. So you're paying Sony Michel less than you're paying Rex Burkhead. So, and he's a guy who has a lot more upside. I think that they want to invest in running backs who can give them versatility as well, because that makes their offense a little bit more unpredictable. I think that's kind of where people are projecting Sony Michel, because he can catch out of the backfield and he can pass protect. But yeah, it's a little bit more zigging while other people are zagging, and maybe Bill Belichick is seeing a lot of the speed on defense, the undersized linebackers, the undersized edge guys, which I was actually going to bring up that point with Isaiah Wynn too. The more undersized edge guys that are coming into the league, it kind of makes more sense to have an undersized offensive tackle too, someone who's super athletic, and height might not matter as much if a guy who's 6'2", 245 is rushing at him, rather than a guy who's maybe 6'5", 270 or something. So I don't know. It's definitely interesting that they're never going to answer why they're doing this. You tried to get it out of Nick Caserio, but
God knows what the hell he said. He said it's on a matter of resource allocation, and then I have no idea. Then he spoke for 2 more minutes. I have 0 idea what it was.
Yeah. It is interesting to just see how the Patriots offense kind of morphs over the years in what the emphasis is, and it kind of goes opposite a lot of times to what the general NFL trend is. I mean, like, you've seen the Patriots bring back the fullback a lot in the last couple of years. Fullback doesn't even exist for like 75% of the NFL. And now you're seeing running backs kind of get devalued a little bit, and the Patriots are kind of reversing course on that and valuing their running backs more than they did. I mean, there was a time for 10 years or so where they didn't pay any running back more than $1 million, $1.5 million, yeah. And now all of them are making more than, I think the lowest paid running back on this team, other than maybe Brandon Bolden, would be making more than the highest paid running back from 2015 or 2016. So yeah. They're really devoting a lot of resources to this position, like you said. And I think, I have to imagine they're hoping that Sony Michel can be what Dion Lewis was last year.
Yeah, or even more. I mean, a guy that you might be able to depend on even more heavily.
Yeah, a lot of people are comparing him to Alvin Kamara a little bit, who obviously was electric for New Orleans last year. So if he can turn out anything like that, it's going to be a great pick for the Patriots.
I think he might have a little more big play capability than Dion Lewis. And
yeah.
Lewis, I think people would be surprised to hear that, but Lewis didn't really rip off long runs, ever. He's a highlight reel because he can juke people out of their shoes, but he really was kind of a grinder between the tackles, and he would pick up a lot of 10, 12-yard runs, but he didn't really break those like 40, 50-yard runs. Sony Michel looks like he has a little more of the big play ability, and when we try to figure out exactly what they're doing at running back, Doug, I thought made a good point. Like, they want guys who can do both, and really the only player on their team before they drafted Michel who can be a threat as a runner and receiver is Rex Burkhead.
Yeah.
Jeremy Hill's pretty one-dimensional, Mike Gillisley's one-dimensional, and James White is solely a receiver. So they probably did want to add, in case Burkhead gets hurt, which is likely, they wanted to add someone who could kind of keep the defense on the field.
Yeah, I think Dion Lewis's greatest attribute was turning those 0 to 2 yard runs into 10 to 12 yard runs.
Yeah. And then Sony Michel, I mean, he averaged 7.9 yards per carry as a senior, so he obviously has that kind of home run, big play potential.
Yeah, and his Pro Football Focus has this, his breakaway percentage was 56.2. So I believe that means 56.2% of his total rushing yards came on runs of 15 yards or more.
Okay. See, that's probably the correct interpretation. When I heard that, I thought it meant that 50% of his runs were breakaways. And I was like, how'd this dude not go number one in the NFL draft?
How do you not have 4,000 yards?
I probably should have carried it more than 120 times.
But yeah, so that's, I mean, he definitely had major big play ability at Georgia, and you can just watch any of his highlights to see a slew of big runs there.
Yep.
Let's move on to the Patriots' second-round pick. They took Duke Dawson, 56 overall. That was after they moved back twice, then moved up once. Honestly, I mean, I kind of hate to say this, but not the most exciting pick. He's a slot cornerback at 56 overall. He was definitely very productive at Florida. Our buddy Adam Kirkjian of the Boston Herald said that he gets a little bit grabby at times, had some penalties, but you can't really argue with his overall production as a cornerback at Florida. I believe he led up a
40%,
something ridiculous.
40.
This is going to take me too long.
37.1 or something.
37.1 quarterback rating as a cornerback. He led up 21 catches on 48 targets for 223 yards with 2 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. Patriots, it feels like they haven't got a lot of interceptions out of their cornerbacks in the last few years. Logan Ryan was really the last one who grabbed a bunch of picks in one season. So maybe Duke Dawson brings a little bit of ball hawking skills at the position. I don't think that this bodes very well for Cyrus Jones, who was the Patriots' second-round pick in 2016. He was taken, 60th overall? Duke Dawson's taken 56 overall, so that alone tells you that they might value him a little bit more than Cyrus Jones. Cyrus Jones missed all of last season with a torn ACL, and there's going to be a ton of competition at cornerback this season because Stephon Gilmore, Jason McCourty, Eric Rowe, Jonathan Jones, Duke Dawson, that's pretty much who you could predict to be the Patriots' 5 cornerbacks. But then you've got guys like Ryan Lewis and Keon Crossan and J.C. Jackson, Cyrus Jones. So it's definitely interesting what this means for Cyrus Jones for the future, I think.
Yeah. Dawson's definitely a little bit of a versatile guy, too. He played slot corner, outside corner, and a little bit of safety at Florida. I know Nick Caserio was really kind of pumping up his versatility during his post-draft news conference. But yeah, definitely kind of have to put Cyrus Jones on the roster bubble, even if he wasn't there already, which he probably was, considering has basically 1 year. He's had 1 year of NFL experience, and it was not good whatsoever. He missed all of last season as with the torn ACL. And if Braxton Barrios, who we're going to get to in a little bit, if he can kind of take over the punt return duties, which he did at Miami, there might not be a role for Cyrus Jones on this team at all.
Yeah, what was interesting was that they moved up to get Dawson. I just wonder if there was another guy who went off the board right before Dawson, MJ Stewart of North Carolina, who's pretty similar, well-built, stout, like 5'10", 200-pound
slot guy.
So I think that might have been, maybe they were looking at both those guys and hoping one would get to them, and once MJ Stewart came off the board, they decided that they needed to get their guy. So clearly that's a position, I think that when they're talking about drafting a cornerback, I think they were looking at a specific type of cornerback. Because of Dawson in theory, because he's so well built, he's really not that much smaller than someone like Patrick Chung. Yeah. He's probably only 10 pounds lighter than him. I wonder how much he can help just toward the line of scrimmage if you're going to play, say, 4 corners and 2 safeties in a 6 defensive back look.
Yeah, and I think that, the way Caserio was talking, we might even see someone like Dawson convert to safety at some point. Casario mentioned that Devin McCourty came in as a cornerback, and then he became one of the Patriots' most dependable players as a free safety. So it's possible that we could see a switch like that down the line with Dawson, and it's also possible that if the Patriots want to keep 6 cornerbacks and 4 safeties, maybe Dawson gives them a little bit of versatility as a potential safety over maybe a guy like Jordan Richards. I don't think the Patriots fans would mind if Jordan Richards was left off.
I think you got him on
the roster. I did keep him on in my 53-man roster projection. Cyrus Jones as well. If you follow him on Instagram, it seems like he's starting a budding rap career. He's been rapping on Instagram.
Has he?
So
Sony Michel's a rapper too.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Maybe they can.
Fly Guy 2 Stacks.
Is that why? Is that why? It's interesting.
That's his thing. Go on. He's got a bunch. All the stuff's on like SoundCloud.
Wow.
Kind of interesting. I only listened to one song, but it's about like his journey as growing up in America. His parents are Haitian immigrants. So he's basically tells his life story.
He seems like an interesting dude from talking to him a little bit after the draft. He should be fun to cover.
Yep.
Definitely. Then the Patriots had a big stretch where they didn't pick anyone, but this is as good a time as any, I guess, to talk about Trent Brown, since the Patriots traded their 3rd-round pick to the 49ers for Trent Brown, and what was it, a 4th round?
117 maybe? No, I think later than 117.
5th-round pick?
It was
I've lost track of all these.
Okay, so they traded their 3rd-round pick for Trent Brown and a 5th-round pick. So it was basically the equivalent of an early 4th-round pick that they gave up for Trent Brown, which I thought it was kind of a lot. And I say this because the 49ers have Joe Staley at left tackle. They drafted Mike McGlinchey, number 9 overall. So the 49ers didn't really have a spot for Trent Brown. It was rumored out there that they were trading him. There was rumors that he came in out of shape. It kind of seemed like the 49ers were going to unload this guy one way or another. So when those rumors kind of started popping up, I was like, oh, they'll probably trade like a late-round pick for him, some sort of like Kyle Van Noy deal or something like a James O'Shaughnessy where they flip late-round picks. It wasn't that way. This is a significant amount to give up for this guy who doesn't really have a direct path to a starting role, because Trent Brown mostly played right tackle with the 49ers. Patriots drafted Isaiah Wynn, who, as we were just saying, projects as the starting left tackle. The Patriots have already got Marcus Cannon at right tackle. So basically, Trent Brown fills what kind of Cameron Fleming or Adrian Waddle were last year. He's definitely a lot better, and if Wynn doesn't work out, then you would assume that he would compete with some other guys like Antonio Garcia, Cole Croston, Adrian Waddle for that starting left tackle role. But since he hasn't done it at the NFL level, you can't just plug that guy in and say, okay, this is going to be your starting left tackle last year. So I thought it was a little bit of a puzzling move, but the more I think about it, the more I'm like, whatever. I think I was talking to Mike Reese about it from ESPN in the media workroom, and he kind of said that it's equivalent to what the Patriots gave up for like a Martellus Bennett or a Dwayne Allen or even like, I guess it's a little bit more than Cassius Marsh, but that's kind of the going rate as far as the Patriots are concerned for maybe these backup high value offensive players.
Yeah, who are often on the last year of their contract.
Yeah.
Like Trent Brown's entering a contract year. I think, last year they needed all those tackles to get by because Cannon suffers a season-ending injury. Waddle really didn't play much in the entire second half of the year. So if they didn't have Cannon, Solder, Waddle, and Fleming, they probably would have been in some trouble. So maybe this year they're just viewing it as a position that they need to stockpile some guys who are proven, because I'm sure they love Isaiah Wynn, they drafted him in the 1st round, but you don't truly know what you have in him yet. You don't know what you have in Cole Croston. He's never played. Tony Garcia was on IR all last year, or the non-football illness list. So those guys are all unknowns. At least Brown has played in the NFL, and can be a starting caliber tackle if he needs to play. So I agree with you. It might have been a little more than giving up a 3rd-round pick essentially is a little much for someone who you're probably only going to have 1 year and who may or may not play at all. But it's a really important position, and they needed some more veteran depth.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's hard to project whether Trent Brown, where he kind of fits into this Patriots offense, because he's hardly played any left tackle in the NFL. But like you said, the 49ers also have Joe Staley, who's one of the better left tackles in football. entrenched over there. So he wasn't going to bump that guy out of that position regardless. So who knows? I think we're going to have to kind of study up on him and actually talk to him a little bit to see how that whole kind of relationship worked, whether he has the potential to play left tackle and just wasn't able to because there was no spot open for him in San Francisco, or if he is one of those guys that is sort of just a right tackle in the NFL. I think ideally for the Patriots, the ideal situation is having Isaiah Wynn start at left tackle and then having Trent Brown be your top swing guy that can play either if Marcus Cannon kind of has some sort of setback in his injury recovery, or if Isaiah Wynn isn't quite ready. He's definitely a good veteran guy to have there. I know Pro Football Focus ranked him pretty highly last year. He was only able to play in 10 games because he had a season-ending foot injury, I believe it was, that kept him out of the end of the season. But I know he ranked pretty highly on those offensive line metrics over at Pro Football Focus. So a lot to give up, like you said, but it seems to be probably a quality and definitely a more proven player than they had on the roster than some of these young guys.
Well, Kyle Shanahan said in March that he's the best pass protection offensive lineman he's ever seen in his life. And then unfortunately,
he traded him 2 months
John Lynch traded him 2 months later. So Kyle Shanahan's like, come on, man. This guy's a future Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
So
Von Miller's also had some praise for him in the past. Who knows how genuine. He said he was the best right tackle in football 2 years ago.
Wow.
Who knows if he was pulling his leg about
after,
that. But
like practicing.
it was after joint practices before last season, I believe.
Yeah.
So
certainly some high praise. I would say that he's huge. He's 6'9", 355 pounds. Doesn't have the prototypical athleticism for a left tackle, but I guess when you're that massive, it might not matter that much. It's kind of get in the way of people.
It's a little funny that the two people competing for the Patriots starting left tackle job could be 6 inches apart from one another, and Isaiah Wynn, who's 6'3", and then Trent Brown, who's 6'9".
It's going to be like that movie Twins with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito when they're walking on the field together.
Is he the biggest player in the NFL?
He
almost has to be.
Yeah.
6'8", 359. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
I've heard he's been up around 400 earlier in his career, I think, too, when he was coming out of school.
That's pretty
very
ridiculous.
large man.
So the Patriots' next pick was Purdue linebacker Jajuan Bentley. None of us, I think, will speak for you guys. None of us had any idea who this guy was.
This was the first what the hell pick that seems to happen every year with the Patriots.
It was one of those where like you wait and you wait and you wait and you wait for the Patriots to pick a player because they trade down a million times, and then Jajuan Bentley comes across the screen and you're like, all right, got some research to do here.
We're all sitting there. I'm like, Phil, do you know anything about it? Phil Perry knew it. Phil Perry and Doug, they knew most of the prospects, but I was just like, I don't know this.
Yeah.
I got nothing.
No, we
He's
had
projected as, I think, a 7th rounder in a lot of the pre-draft projections. So
I've talked, or I don't know if I've talked myself into this because that would mean I was like sitting on my couch talking to myself about Jajuan Bentley, which I will promise you was not happening. But the more I read up about him, I don't know. I kind of like the pick. He's big. He's 6'1", 200 and anywhere from 245 to 260. Like Purdue basically treated him like he was like a golden boy there. Like they were always talking about how athletic he was, about how smart he was. He's only 21 years old. He started all 4 years at Purdue. He was a captain in his last 3 years. So he's got all of those, the things the Patriots like out of players. I think he's a good Purdue athlete, which means that like he's an NFL player, but he's not a tremendous athlete for a linebacker. I'm not sure how much he'll help out in pass coverage. For some reason, he was used at the end of the line as kind of like an outside linebacker, pass rusher at the Senior Bowl. Nick Sirianni already said that he projects him as a middle linebacker in the Patriots system. So this is a guy who will be competing with Landon Roberts, I think, for that middle linebacker position. And when you bring in a guy to compete with Landon Roberts, I think that Patriots fans are going to be pretty happy about that, at least, because Landon Roberts, I think, gets kind of a bad rap with Patriots fans, and they definitely needed to bring in a little bit of competition for him.
Yeah, I do actually see a little bit of a Landon Roberts in his game, which might not be a good thing, in that a lot of his, at least his highlights that are available on YouTube are him kind of flying downhill and killing somebody in the backfield. He hits like a truck, and it was pretty hilarious reading his pre-draft profile. It's like, I think it was like a barrel-chested mass of a man or something like that. He had some pretty entertaining strengths and weaknesses. Yeah, he's a very big guy. I think he's dropped. I think he's dropped about 15 pounds since the end of his senior year. But yeah, those are highlights that look good on tape. But if he kind of plays with that reckless abandon like Landon Roberts does, Roberts also often found himself kind of out of positioning and wasn't too great in pass coverage. So hopefully, the Patriots have to be hoping that Bentley brings some of the positives of Landon Roberts without some of those kind of red flags that have prevented him from being a quality linebacker over the last 2 years.
Yeah, he's a lot bigger than, I wouldn't describe Landon as barrel chest.
No. Body-wise, they are definitely very different.
Yeah. And Landon Roberts, I mean, he came on really strong. Was a surprise early in his rookie year, but I would say he's been kind of underwhelming since. He's just been inconsistent.
And he's a 6th-round pick.
Yeah, right.
That's
yeah,
what
exactly. I think he came on strong, and he had a few flash plays, like when he drove Joe Thomas backwards and made a tackle. And then they traded Jamie Collins like 2 weeks after that. So everyone was kind of like, wow, they found, this guy's, they don't need Jamie Collins. They found this guy. So I think maybe the expectations around him were a little unfair. But as Doug said, he was a 6th-round pick. He played a lot last year. That's a position they probably needed to upgrade or at least bring competition for him. So, I mean, I think the surprise was they waited so long to address linebacker, but they did double up there. And, this Bentley, from what we've learned, seems like he has a decent chance to make the team, I would say.
Yeah, and the other linebacker that they did double dip on was Christian Sam. Casario said that he's maybe a little bit more of a weak side linebacker. He's more athletic than Jajuan Bentley, but he's not like a freak athlete. He's not like a Fred Warner type that we were talking about earlier. He's not like a Leighton Vander Esch or Rashaan Evans, but definitely a better athlete than Jajuan Bentley. And, maybe only one of these guys makes the roster. Maybe 2 out of Bentley, Sam, and Roberts makes the roster. There's definitely a lot of competition coming in at linebacker next season. So we'll basically just have to see how these guys stack up basically throughout their careers at linebacker, because they were taken about 35 picks apart here.
Exactly 35.
Yeah, about 35. I can do math. I mean, I don't have a lot on Sam, but it's an interesting pick.
I don't.
Same.
Yeah, and I think we can kind of fly through these a little bit.
We can move through the later round guys
pretty
quickly.
Wide receiver Braxton Barrios was the Patriots' final 6th-round pick, their second 6th-round pick. He's a Danny Amendola, Julian Edelman, Wes Welker type receiver. Definitely looks the part. Has more speed than those guys. Ran a 4.44 at Miami's Pro Day. Has some punt return abilities. So basically the most predictable pick in the entire draft for the Patriots. And it was like, all right, yep, they got him. Cool.
Yeah, we were basically just kind of waiting around for this pick to happen.
Yeah.
Once the late rounds came around, we're like, the Pats haven't gotten a receiver yet. Probably going to end up picking this Barrios kid from Miami. Yeah, I mean, his player comp on his NFL draft profile is Danny Amendola. He basically is Danny Amendola. Yeah. I mean, like you said, he's a little bit faster, but he's going to bring the same kind of most likely play the same kind of role if he does make this team. Obviously, it's going to be, which I think we're going to get into in a little bit, it's going to be very difficult to make the team as a wide receiver this year. But it's a very Patriots-esque pick, to say the least.
Yeah, the receiver depth chart is absolutely stacked. So it's going to be, they have some really tough cuts, and I'm sure this is a player they like because obviously he fits the system. Like it's an important position to what they do. But I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see how it all plays out. They also, you draft this guy, but you have Jordan Matthews, who's a bigger slot guy on a 1-year contract, and you have a bunch of other guys. So it's, I think he's got to show something in camp. I don't think by any means it's just like automatic because he's, the Danny Amendola comp, automatically he's going to make the team.
Yeah, I would say that, they used the 210th overall pick on him. Might be kind of tough to get to the practice squad if they were looking to do that, but certainly no lock to make the roster. Probably the most interesting pick is up next, Danny Etling, the quarterback out of LSU. Patriots really didn't show much interest in drafting a quarterback earlier than Danny Etling. They had the opportunity to trade up for a guy like Josh Rosen, who fell to number 10. They did not do that. They passed on Lamar Jackson twice. They passed on Mason Rudolph, I think, 3 times by trading down.
Go in the 2nd round.
Yeah, he went in the 3rd round. So, they had plenty of opportunities to draft him. They had plenty of opportunities to draft Kyle Lauletta, kept trading down. The one guy that they didn't trade down immediately before he went was Mike White, so I'm not sure if they would have taken him before he went off the board, but probably not because they had plenty of opportunities to get him before then, and then they traded away the pick right before Luke Falk went in the 6th round. So they really, like I said, didn't show any interest in drafting a quarterback before they got Danny Etling in the 7th round. I think he's an intriguing prospect, if only because his biggest knock was mechanics, and he spent the offseason working with Tom Brady's throwing coach on his mechanics. So it's possible that we see a different player than we saw at LSU when he comes into camp. At the same time, I don't think there's a great chance of him making the 53-man roster, and he's probably a guy who would be pretty easy to slip onto the practice squad, because I'm not sure if there were many teams, like throwing their pen at the wall, as Nick Caserio would say, when Danny Etling came off the board.
Throwing their pen at the wall. Yeah, I thought, actually, it's something we probably should have brought up earlier, not to steer too far off the path, but Josh Rosen was there at 10, and they, the package that Arizona traded to move up from 15 to 10, they did not really give up a lot. No. Arizona traded the 15, a third rounder, and a fifth rounder to move up to 10.
Yeah.
To me, if the Patriots really wanted Josh Rosen, they could have blown that offer out of the water, I think. If you go by the trade value chart, if they traded their 23, their 63 or 43, I'm not sure, were second rounder, and the third rounder, so that would have left them with their own first round pick and their own second round pick. They could have, that was a far superior offer to what Arizona gave Oakland. So
yeah.
I don't know if that was discussed. I don't know if that was even a consideration for them, but they had enough to move up, and it just, for whatever reason, didn't happen.
I guess I'm also not sure if Oakland would have wanted to trade with the Patriots,
right,
or a little bit more willing
for
to
Oakland
trade with Arizona.
Dropping down further, and I'd say Oakland's targeting Colton Miller. I don't know if they thought he wouldn't be available at 23, so they wouldn't want to drop to the 23rd pick. But
you're also trading in conference at that point.
Yeah, that's true. You're trading in conference, but the Patriots could have at least offered a second rounder, whereas Arizona was giving a third and a fifth.
Yeah, which is really not that much.
They didn't really offer a lot.
No,
No, definitely. I mean, the biggest takeaway from this draft overall, I think, is that the Patriots just didn't value these quarterbacks that much. Either they didn't value these quarterbacks, or they didn't believe that it was enough of a pressing need to spend a pick before the 7th round on one. And yeah, Etling it's a flyer. Basically, he spoke on his post-draft conference call that he's coming in with no expectations, which is exactly what he should do, because it would really be kind of an upset at this point if he even makes the 53-man roster. Like you said, it's probably going to be pretty easy to sneak him onto the practice squad, unless he comes out and lights it up in the fourth quarter of some of these preseason games. But I mean, there are a couple things to like about him. He was pretty careful with the ball in college. Had 16 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. This past season at LSU, I think he only had 6 or 7 over his final 2 collegiate seasons. Played in 4 different offenses. He started his career at Purdue, transferred to LSU, played under 4 different offensive coordinators. So had to do a lot of kind of learning on the fly, learning new playbooks, learning new schemes, new personnel, all that kind of thing. Again, he slipped. He wasn't drafted until pick number 219, so you really can't expect much of anything from him. But Patriots obviously saw enough in him to draft him above some of these other late round guys like Logan Woodside and Chad Kanoff and a couple of these other sort of flyer guys.
Final 2 picks the Patriots got were Keon Crossan, the cornerback out of Western Carolina, and Ryan Izzo out of Florida State. Crossan, basically, Nick Caserio admitted they saw what he did at a pro day. He ripped it up, had an insane workout, and that's really what tipped off the Patriots too. Keon Crossan also looks like he's a pretty big hitter. And Ryan Izzo, I don't know, he's got potential, more of a blocking tight end. I watched a little bit of him last night, and he is a good blocker, but he'll be at tight end positions kind of tough to break into. So we'll see if he can beat out, Dwayne Allen or Jacob Hollister or Will Tye or Troy Nicholas or whoever else is in that group.
Well, if they like him at all, I mean, Ryan Izzo is the 7th round pick. If he's at all close to Dwayne Allen, is probably better off than Dwayne Allen for $5 million.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I think how Dwayne Allen shows up this spring and summer is really going to shape how the Patriots approach the tight end position, because if they still like him even after his kind of underwhelming first season, then I guess you keep him. But he's supposed to make $5 million this year, so if anybody below him really kind of projects to be more productive than him, they can easily cut him, keep Jacob Hollister, who's still on a super cheap contract as an undrafted guy last year, Ryan Izzo, Troy Nicholas, I'm sure they signed for pretty cheap. I didn't see his exact contract. So there's a lot of super low value, or not low value, but guys they're not paying a whole lot that are behind Dwayne Allen, who they currently are playing a lot. So we'll see how that shakes out.
Yeah. Real quick, we're gonna just go through what the biggest areas of competition on the Patriots roster are after the draft. But I did want to talk real briefly about how Nick Caserio was the one who spoke after each day of the draft, rather than Bill Belichick, and it was wild. I mean, Nick Caserio was probably the fastest talker I've ever seen in my life, or just the most energetic speaker I've ever seen. He sounds like Bill Belichick on Fast Forward, and I don't know. It was just it was always fun to see him come up to the podium, jazzed up and excited after the day's draft.
We spoke to him the
on day one of the draft, it must have been close to midnight or after midnight when we spoke to him, and we left it saying, there's no way this guy's going to sleep before like 5:30 in the morning.
Oh no, he's crashing this whole week. He's probably sleeping for like 3 straight days.
I pictured it. Yeah,
he was. I mean, I've never seen someone just so
jazzed up.
Yeah, like I don't even know what to say. It's hard for us to even convey this. You guys should just go on YouTube and just watch his press conferences. Yes. A, he sounds exactly like Bill Belichick. B, he just is so freaking fired up about Isaiah Wynn and Sony Michel. Not that we weren't, but damn.
I pictured him leaving the press conference room and going straight up to the concourse of the stadium and just sprinting laps for 2 or 3 hours until the sun came up.
Do like the get out sprint?
Yeah.
Well, we said he was driving to Georgia to pick up Isaiah Wynn and Sony Michel and coming back. He wasn't sleeping that night, man. He bought a 6-pack of Diet Dew and he was sitting on the road.
So I did a 53-man roster projection last night. I will give you guys a second to think about this because I'll give my answer. But what do you think is the biggest area of competition, or the position that has the most competition on the Patriots roster? I will say it's linebacker, because in putting together this 53-man roster projection, basically what I did was took out like the easy guys to cut first, and then that would allow me to trim it as I went along. At linebacker, I kept all 9 through the first pass on this because that's Jajuan Bentley, who's a 5th-round pick, Marquise Flowers is the Patriots' most athletic linebacker, Dante Hightower, a starter, Brandon King, special teams stud, Harvey Longy, who I think showed a lot of potential last year as an undrafted free agent, Christian Sam, 6th-rounder, Kyle Van Noy, another starter, then Nicholas Grigsby, special teams stud, and Elandon Roberts, who was basically a pseudo-starter last year. So there's no one in that group who you can just easily slice off the roster and say, all right, he's gone. The guys I did cut were Nicholas Grigsby and Elandon Roberts. But, I mean, Grigsby was a special teams machine last year. And like I just said, Elandon Roberts was a pseudo-starter last year. So you would be expecting a lot out of guys like Jajuan Bentley, Marquise Flowers, and Christian Sam to not only push him out of the roster as a starter, but also push him off the roster altogether. So linebacker, I think, is going to be a really hard place for the Patriots to cut when it comes time to do that in September.
Yeah, it's going to be tremendously difficult. Like you just said, there's no obvious cut in that group. Pretty much every other position has at least one guy that would be a real surprise if he ended up making the roster. I'm still going to go wide receiver, just because even before they got Braxton Barrios, this was probably going to be the most competitive position on this team in camp. I mean, right now you have 6 guys making it right now: Braxton Barrios, Julian Edelman, Chris Hogan, Jordan Matthews, Cordero Patterson, Matthew Slater. Overall, probably Slater, Edelman, Hogan, the only locks on this entire team, and now they have 11 guys competing for probably 6 spots. I know they can keep 7, especially if they view someone like Patterson as more of a special teams guy. But even in the past, they've really never done that. There's only been one time during Bill Belichick's tenure that they've kept 7 receivers to start the season, and even that season, they cut one of them a week later. So it's they've basically been 6 or fewer wide receivers on the Patriots' 53-man roster throughout basically since 2000. So there are going to be some hard cuts on here. I mean, you look at the guys that you have not making the team right now. I mean, Cody Hollister is pretty obvious. He's probably the low man down. Chris Lacey, an undrafted guy, he has a really kind of uphill climb too. But other than that, Philip Dorsett, who played a ton last year, even though he wasn't all that productive. Kenny Britt, who kind of joined late in the season. I know they still have some pretty high hopes for him. He was a 1,000-yard receiver just 2 years ago. Malcolm Mitchell, who's, I know this is kind of injury-based right now, but still, I mean, he's a guy that is not a roster lock, even though he showed a ton of potential as a rookie. And then Riley McCarron, who is kind of that up-and-coming slot guy before Braxton Barrios got here. So now they have 2 up-and-coming slot receivers that are kind of can project as that Julian Edelman, Danny Amendola role. So a lot of these guys are not going to make the team, and it's going to be very, very difficult to decide.
Barrios and McCarron are really going to have to be, competing for Julian Edelman's attention this summer, just to see who can really glob onto him even more and really try to learn from that guy. But we'll see. What's your position? Yeah, I mean, you can.
No. I'll do a different one. But I would just say wide receiver, I think, is the highest. Not only are they tough cuts, but I think it's like the highest quality of players. Like Kenny Britt is 2 years removed from a 1,000-yard season, and Dorsett was their first-round pick. And these guys, to me, are like pretty clearly on the outside looking in, because I think Jordan Matthews is going to make it, and I think Patterson's going to make it just because he's such an awesome returner. And you want to get the ball in his hands, I think, 3-4 times a game just to see if he can break a big play. I'll go offensive tackle. I don't think the quality of the competitors isn't quite what it is at wide receiver, but I just think there's a lot of uncertainty at the position in general. Marcus Cannon, if healthy, is going to be your starting right tackle. But then you have Waddle, who started a good amount last year, I know, on the right side. I think in Detroit he did play a little bit on the left side, though. You have Antonio Garcia, who's a complete unknown because he didn't play last year. We'll wait to see what he looks like in camp, but he supposedly lost a good amount of weight, so we'll see if he's, back into the kind of shape that he's going to need to be in this season. Isaiah Wynn, obviously, they draft. Trent Brown they acquire. Cole Crossan, I think they liked as a high upside prospect last year. So you just have a lot of bodies, and to me the decision is how many of those guys you're going to keep. Yeah. They kept 5 last year because I think they wanted Crossan as a developmental prospect, and they knew that they needed the 4 other guys. They needed Waddle and Fleming, 2 guys who could play in a pinch if Crossan wasn't ready. Do you want to do that again this year, or do you want to instead keep 4? I just think they're going to have some tough decisions to make at that spot, and it's an incredibly important position for the team.
Yeah, I mean, Adrian Waddle, everyone was so psyched when the Patriots brought him back in. He was actually left off of my 53-man roster projection because my tackles were Trent Brown, Marcus Cannon, Antonio Garcia, and Isaiah Wynn. I'm not sure how you really argue with any of those 4. And then I even kept Cole Crossan just because he provides some versatility as a guard. So I mean, you're looking at a potential scenario there where a guy like either Waddle or Crossan is left off the roster. Just going through this real quick, some other positions. I mean, cornerback, if you only keep 5, then a guy like Cyrus Jones might be left out. Defensive tackle, Adam Butler and Vincent Valentine might be fighting for one spot there. Defensive end, Eric Lee certainly doesn't have a guaranteed spot on the roster. Tight end, it's basically Rob Gronkowski, and then everyone else is fighting for 1 or 2 slots. And I kept Dwayne Allen and Will Tye just because Allen is the proven commodity. Will Tye might give you a little bit more receiving upside. I think guys like Jacob Hollister, Ryan Izzo, Troy Nicholas, and Shane, however you pronounce his last name. But I mean, there's definitely a situation where Hollister, Izzo, or Nicholas makes the roster over Allen or Tye. So that's a really tough position as well. And at running back, if they only keep 4 running backs, then Mike Gillislee and Jeremy Hill are left off the roster. And if there's no injuries at that position, then at least one of Gillislee or Hill is not going to be making the 2018 roster. So definitely a ton of competition all across the board for the Patriots.
I think they'll keep 5 backs. I think they will just because of the Burkhead is an injury risk. Michele is probably going to play a lot as a rookie, but I think they want to have that either Gillislee or Hill kind of between the tackles guy who they can turn to at the end of games and just like they did with LeGarrette Blount.
They could also cut Brandon Bolden this year.
They could finally do that because they have special teams guys at other positions, so they might not. Yeah, they might get rid of Bolden.
The last 4 or 5 spots on this roster are going to be very, very difficult near the end of camp, and it goes back to kind of what you guys were saying. How many guys at each position do you keep? I mean, how many tackles do you keep? Do you keep 5 safeties, or do you roll with 4 safeties and just kind of hope that you don't have any injury risk there? There's going to be a ton of decisions. It's going to be a fascinating summer. I mean, we still have like 4 or 5 months before all this has to get settled down. But it's going to be entertaining.
So definitely entertaining draft. Like you were just saying, entertaining offseason is continuing to go on. So thank you very much, Kevin, for joining us. You can follow Kevin at Kevin R. Duffy on Twitter. You can follow his stuff at masslive.com. You can follow Zach at Zach Cox Nesson. That's ZACK. Cox Nesson on Twitter. You can follow me at Doug Kyde, that's DOUGKYED on Twitter, and keep it on NESN.com and MassLive.com for all of your Patriots coverage as we continue on with the offseason.